Thank you, Don. I think it was 3.5 years ago this gentleman made his first appearance on the show. It was one of our trips out to California before we moved here permanently. And at that time, he was the executive treasurer of the Burbank City Council, and he came to give us some greetings from Burbank, and we asked him on the first day of 1975 if he would come back again. He is now the executive secretary, or the executive treasurer. What did I say first?
I lost you.
Well,
he's been promoted.
He's been promoted.
Yes. It's a high position.
Yes, it is. Would you welcome Mr. Philip Brooks?
I beg your pardon, I haven't gotten to my blue mark yet. Well, friends, it's been one... Yes. I don't know, really, no kidding. Did anybody see anybody else besides me see a snake? Really was one here. And a baboon, and a gorilla. You know, it's strange that it would happen. But not just a very few weeks ago, a sister-in-law of mine, who happens to come from my wife comes from Buffalo. What son of a gun? I thought I got the last one. I wish I'd known I had a choice. Well, the Buffalo Zoo had just received a shipment of the largest gorilla ever captured in captivity. That didn't even sound right over here. And my sister-in-law and her husband went to see the gorilla. They were standing there, and they were looking at it, and all of a sudden the gorilla spotted my sister-in-law, and he just couldn't take his eyes off her. And all of a sudden he went. And my brother-in-law nudged her, and he said, I think he kind of goes for you. And she said, don't be silly. And with that, the gorilla grabbed a couple of the bars and pulled them real far apart, reached out and grabbed my sister-in-law and pulled her in a cage and started pulling her clothes off her and hugging her and kissing her. And she screamed to her husband, what am I supposed to do? He said, tell him you got a headache. You know, seeing those animals tonight, it sort of takes me back to my childhood when they used to have circuses, and and when I was a child, they used to have a parade before all of the circuses, you know, down Broadway in my hometown. And now that the two big, I don't think they do that anymore. Now that the two big circuses got together and got just one circus now.
Good morning. It is Wednesday, May the 17th, and this is The True Conservative. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the Serenity Prayer and the Star-Spangled Banner, we will have President Biden. Listen carefully. Let's move on. My take, no free lunch, the rape of the mind, and philosophy who needs it. All that and more when I come back. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen.
city and remove your hats for the national anthem of the United States of America.
Thank you. And now, there's no free lunch. 250 Economic Truths by David-Bahnsen.
The essential difference between rich societies and poor societies arises mainly from the fact that rich nations possess a more extensive network of capital goods wisely invested from an entrepreneurial standpoint. These goods consist of machines, tools, computers, buildings, semi-manufactured goods, software, etc., and they exist due to prior savings of the nation's citizens. In other words, comparatively rich societies possess more wealth because they have more time accumulated in the form of capital goods, which places them closer in time to the achievement of much more valuable goals. Jesus Huerta de Soto. The allocation of resources that stems from capital formation is a miracle of markets that feeds on itself unless policymakers interfere to destroy the miracle. A productive and entrepreneurial nation accumulates capital goods over time. A productive and entrepreneurial nation accumulates savings. Savings, capital goods, and investment are the fruits of wealth and its sustenance.
And that was There's No Free Lunch by David-Bahnsen. Back in a minute. Thank you. Who is the true conservative? He is the person that understands that conservatism is not just about politics, but culture as well. He is not selfish, but minds his own business. He acts like an adult. He is patriotic and uses common sense. He expresses what he knows and does so with absolute certainty. He makes judgments, refuses to speculate, speaks clearly and definitively, and is not afraid to say no. He's open-minded, asking why rather than why not. He is consistent, credible, and influential, not ashamed of his existence, unafraid to learn or correct his mistakes. He's a normal American, and he is better than the socialist. He's a better friend, father, brother, family member, and a better person, period. You have to know that. If you don't know with every fiber of your being that being a true conservative is best, then you're wasting your time. Back in a minute. Thank you. What are the true conservatives' suggested political priorities? Number 1, the abolition of abortion throughout the land. Number 2, make nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons obsolete. Number 3, immediate decertification of all public employee unions. 4, the immediate assignment of criminal and civil liabilities to all government regulators. Number 5, the immediate repeal of the so-called Patriot Act. Number 6, the immediate repeal of all emergency dictator laws. Number 7, the reinstatement of writs of outlawry. 8, government-sponsored recalls, ballot initiatives, and referendums. 9, a flexible minimum wage. 10, means-tested health care. 11, the immediate and permanent prohibition of investment banking by any office holder. Back in a minute. Thank you. So it's been in the news that President Biden is going to be cutting his trip to Asia short. He was supposed to participate in the G7 summit and then go to Australia and Papua New Guinea. But apparently he's going to have to postpone the Australia and Papua New Guinea parts of the trip. Now, allegedly, that's because he has to come back and get involved in negotiations over the debt ceiling. I don't think so. I feel sorry for President Biden. I feel very sorry for him. Here he is. He's 86 years old. He's infirm. He's sick. He's ill. Half the time he doesn't know where he is or what he's supposed to do, and I feel sorry for him. My heart aches for this guy. He's now going to be in a position where, again, he has to cut his Asia trip short on top of his Asia trip that he's got to do. Then he has the debt ceiling he has to deal with and the Durham report, and then investigations into his son's dealings or misdealings, if you will, and how they affect him. So he's facing potential criminal probe. So he's got all this pressure on him. He's 86 years old. He's infirm. And so I would say to the Democrats, right here, right now, please don't put this man through it. Don't put him through another 4 years of this kind of torture. Please, you're supposed to be the party of compassion. Act like it. Be compassionate. Vote for somebody else. Back in a minute. Thank you. So I was listening to Varney's My Take, and he's on about stealing and the retail, because Target came out and said that they're going to lose this year $500 million in profits due to organized shoplifting. And Target is one of the stores apparently that has, in which you cannot buy anything at Target that isn't without getting somebody to help you. Everything's locked up. Everything is locked up. Two things about this. First of all, number one, I don't terribly feel, because now Target and others are, by the way, saying that something has to be done about this. He's looking to the politicians or whatnot. Too late. A little too late there for a Target company. They have billions of dollars. They have political action committees. They have lobbying organizations. They should have been doing something about this years ago when this first started. And now, according to Mr. Varney, this was first started getting up steam when George Floyd was killed. So anyhow, the point is that that's when they should have started putting pressure on politicians to either put up or shut up, either fix the problem or get the hell out of office kind of thing. They have a lot of political clout. And I mean Target and their political action committees, etc. So then the other issue, of course, is morals. One of the things I'd wanted to talk about, and I don't think I'd gotten to this week, is that morals in this country have been eroding because the only people that are upholding morals anymore is the church. And the church is now become isolated. It used to be that when I was growing up, the first people to tell you about morals was your parents. For instance, in this particular case, you should not steal. Now, when you got that instruction, it was reinforced throughout society. So when you went to school, your teachers told you you shouldn't steal. When you went to the doctor, when you went to a lawyer, when you went to whomever, these were moral agents, and they made it clear that they were moral agents. Doctors were not going to go ahead and give 16-year-olds birth control. Okay, the doctor would tell the teenager, no, you're too young to be out being sexually active. You want birth control, you come back to me after you're 18 when you're married. Then we'll see about putting you on birth control. So, and it was all, again, because everybody's a moral agent and not just the church. So all of this was mutually reinforcing. So when the child steps out into society, he knows that we're serious. That when his parents tell him, do not steal, when the church tells him, do not steal, he knows that we're serious about it because everybody else is supporting that. Now, the left got rid of all the morals with neutrality, the cult of neutrality. They bullied and intimidated people, police officers even, but lawyers and doctors and teachers into being neutral and not making moral pronouncements. Okay. And some of the reason that they did that was, and were able to do that, was they were able to brainwash people into believing that morals are relative. Okay, so that there is no one moral standard. What's moral for one person might be immoral for somebody else. It's crap. It's baloney. There is one moral standard. There are universal moral standards. Theft is universally unacceptable. Murder is universally unacceptable. I mean, it's just the way it is. But we allowed ourselves to be brainwashed into believing that morals were relative, therefore we had no business making moral judgments and pronouncements, or at least not teachers, lawyers, doctors, the professionals in our lives should stay out of that and just stick to their area of specialty or expertise. So that's where we are now. The kids go out. Mom may tell them, mom and dad may say, don't steal. But as soon as they get on their phones and they hear there's going to be a whole bunch of their friends or a group that's going to be congregating somewhere, and that group then starts looting, they just jump right in. Because as far as they're concerned, mom and dad are not to be taken seriously. That's just mom and dad's morals, mom and dad's idea, and it doesn't apply across the board. So what can we do about it? You and I can have an effect each and every day. One of the things that we can do is when and you should consider this, is whenever you go and you deal with somebody, particularly professional, a doctor, a lawyer, a teacher, ask them a one fundamental question. Are you a Christian? And see what kind of an answer. Consider it. I know it can be tough sometimes because the left wants to try to turn Christianity into something, into something that it's not. Make it controversial. That's the word I was looking for. They try to make Christianity controversial. But when and where you can, you should ask these people, the doctors, the lawyers, the teachers, are you a Christian? And go from there. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, the rape of the mind.
Camouflage in disguise, playing hide and seek with fate. This useful protective trickery is often seen in lower animals who temporarily acquire the form or color of their environment. It is just like the military camouflage. Everybody is acquainted with the color changes of the chameleon, and there are many other animals which are able to change their skin or body form in times of danger. Yet many people are not aware that human skin, too, shows rudimentary attempts at camouflage. The phenomenon of goose flesh resembles the reaction of a frightened, bristling cat. Sudden graying of the hair or discoloration of the skin, which is known technically as fear melanosis, changes our outer color. During the Second World War, I went with a first aid team to Rotterdam after the city had been heavily bombed. As we looked at the people, our first impression was that they were all wearing masks. Their skin was wrinkled and showed a typical camouflage reaction. They were all still badly frightened. It was as if they were in hiding from the tremendous hell of fire that had been thrown down on them. There is a psychological parallel to these physical reactions. It is called feign or faint pattern. Actual psychology looks at both reactions, feigning and fainting, as a passive retreat from reality. This reaction is comparable to shell shock or battle neurosis, the study of which is one of the most absorbing chapters of medicine. Soldier and civilian alike can go into a state of mental paralysis. In such a state, the victim becomes apathetic. He is unable to talk or to move. No dangers really exists for him anymore. He looks dead. Only his frightened, burning eyes seem alive. This death attitude or cataclysmic reaction often has a completely terrifying effect on bystanders. There is nothing so contagious as fainting in any crowded place. It is of the utmost importance to realize how passive, paralyzed, indifferent, and submissive people can become under circumstances which should demand the utmost activity. The totalitarians are making use of man's passive reaction to terror when they put their prisoners into huge concentration camps with only a few guards. They are gambling that the reaction of passivity will keep the victim from rebelling or trying to escape. Like the bird which stands stock still when the snake approaches, man may surrender passively to what he dreads and fears in order to get rid of the tension of anticipation. The thief who surrenders to the police because he cannot stand the tension and insecurity of not knowing when he will be found out is an obvious example. A psychological camouflage reaction lies behind emotional shock and silent panic. The mental paralysis that overcomes some people when they can no longer cope with the circumstances in which they find themselves. Passive surrender to what he fears is one of man's most common reactions to sudden danger. It is not limited to pathological personalities. It occurs much more frequently than wild and overt panic, and displays itself in numerous subtle behavior mechanisms. People may escape into complaints about physical disease. They may take refuge in very important pseudo-tasks and hobbies. They may deny real danger in a seemingly self-securing complacency. They become obstinate and disobedient. Nothing can activate them. They're not interested in politics, they say. Some will try to sell to themselves and to others the paralyzing theory of hopelessness and the inevitability of doom. But don't talk about the nuclear bomb. Others will throw themselves into the oblivion of excessive drinking or hide themselves in long, pointless conferences. Every man has his own psychological Maginot Line, a mental fortress that he believes inviolable. We used to call this the ostrich policy, and the ostrich policy is one of the most dangerous strategies in the world. Beware the totalitarian who preaches peace. His intention may be to push the world into passive surrender to that which it fears. The cult of passivity and so-called relaxation is one of the most dangerous developments of our times. Essentially, it too may represent a camouflage pattern, the double wish not to see the dangers and challenges of life and not to be seen. We cannot escape all the tensions that surround us. They are part of life, and we have to learn to cope with them adequately and to use our leisure time for more creative and gratifying activities. Silent, lonely relaxation with alcohol, sweets, the television screen, or a murder mystery may soothe the mind into a passivity that may gradually make it vulnerable to the seductive ideology of some feared enemy. Denying the danger of totalitarianism through passivity may gradually surrender to its blandishments those who are initially afraid of it. Explosive panics. Most people are far more familiar with the explosive motor reactions we call panic and stampede than they are with the other fear reactions. This is what we call mass hysteria, the chock-and-pour-soy reaction. The baby has its temper tantrums, and older people have their uncontrolled fury and fight-or-flight reactions. Although we usually think of the word panic in describing such phenomena as the hysterical stampede out of a burning theater or the flight of whole populations in terror, there are many subtle steps that lead from the first symptom of unrest we all feel when something is threatening to the great outbursts of crying and running and fighting we see in severe panics. Man shows many forms of panicky, frenzied behavior: epileptic fits, as in trench or war epilepsy, fury, rage, self-destruction, criminal aggression, running amok, deserting from the army, rioting, uncontrolled impulsiveness, breakneck speed in driving. A soldier in a state of panic may behave like an angry child. He may attack his friends or shoot at the members of his own troop. In panic, civilians may begin to cry, shout, walk aimlessly about, wringing their hands. Or they may shout and scold or cry for help. The panicky person spreads panic. Every time he shouts, he incites others to run. Panic is never a question of crude strength or falling energy, but rather of lack of inner structure, of a failing capacity to organize. The panicky leader hesitates to use the powers entrusted to him. The child with temper tantrums lies deep within all of us. The more mysterious and unaccountable the danger, the more primitive our reactions may be. Riots, furious mass movement, and outbreaks of criminality serve to increase fear and panic, and thus can be used to deepen man's sense of insecurity and further his passive surrender to the totalitarian environment. Any terroristic regime compels its victims to repress their reactions of rebellion and anger. The more these reactions are repressed, the more the victims develop tremendous inner rage, which must bide its time and wait until it is permitted some socially sanctioned form of explosion. War is often such a universal panic, a mass discharge of accumulated internal rage. Here, too, the inner fears of mankind are discharged in mass destruction.
And that was Explosive Panics by The Rape of the Mind. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, Chapter 3 of the book by Ayn Rand, Philosophy, Who Needs It?
3. The Metaphysical versus the Man-Made, 1973. God grant me the serenity to accept things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. This remarkable statement is attributed to a theologian with whose ideas I disagree in every fundamental respect, Reinhold Niebuhr. But, omitting the form of a prayer, i.e., the implication that one's mental emotional states are a gift from God, that statement is profoundly true, as a summary and a guideline. It names the mental attitude which a rational man must seek to achieve. The statement is beautiful in its eloquent simplicity. But the achievement of that attitude involves philosophy's deepest metaphysical moral issues. I was startled to learn that statement has been adopted as a prayer by Alcoholics Anonymous, which is not exactly a philosophical organization. In view of the fact that today's social, psychological theories stress emotional, not intellectual, needs and frustrations as the causes of human suffering, e.g. the lack of love, that organization deserves credit for discovering that such a prayer is relevant to the problems of alcoholics, that the misery of confusion on those issues has devastating consequences and is one of the factors driving men to drink, i.e., to seek escape from reality. This is just one more example of the way in which philosophy rules the lives of men who have never heard or cared to hear about it. Most men spend their lives in futile rebellion against things they cannot change, in passive resignation to things they can, and, never attempting to learn the difference, in chronic guilt and self-doubt on both counts. Observe what philosophical premises are implicit in that advice and are required for an attempt to live up to it. If there are things that a man can change, it means that he possesses the power of choice, i.e., the faculty of volition. If he does not possess it, he can change nothing, including his own actions and characteristics, such as courage or lack of it. If there are things that man cannot change, it means that there are things that cannot be affected by his actions and are not open to his choice. This leads to the basic metaphysical issue that lies at the root of any system of philosophy: the primacy of existence or the primacy of consciousness. The primacy of existence, of reality, is the axiom that existence exists, i.e., that the universe exists independent of consciousness, of any consciousness, that things are what they are, that they possess a specific nature, an identity. The epistemological corollary is the axiom that consciousness is the faculty of perceiving that which exists, and that man gains knowledge of reality by looking outward. The rejection of these axioms represents a reversal, the primacy of consciousness, the notion that the universe has no independent existence, that it is the product of a consciousness, either human or divine or both. The epistemological corollary is the notion that man gains knowledge of reality by looking inward, either at his own consciousness or at the revelations it receives from another superior consciousness. The source of this reversal is the inability or unwillingness fully to grasp the difference between one's inner state and the outer world, i.e., between the perceiver and the perceived, thus blending consciousness and existence into one indeterminate package deal. Package dealing is the fallacy of failing to discriminate crucial differences. It consists of treating together, as parts of a single conceptual whole or package, elements which differ essentially in nature, truth status, importance, or value. This crucial distinction is not given to man automatically. It has to be learned. It is implicit in any awareness, but it has to be grasped conceptually and held as an absolute. As far as it can be observed, infants and savages do not grasp it. They may perhaps have some rudimentary glimmer of it. Very few men ever choose to grasp it and fully accept it. The majority keep swinging from side to side, implicitly recognizing the primacy of existence in some cases and denying it in others, adopting a kind of hit-or-miss rule of thumb epistemological agnosticism, through ignorance and or by intention, the result of which is the shrinking of their intellectual range, i.e., of their capacity to deal with abstractions. And although few people today believe that the singing of mystic incantations will bring rain, most people still regard as valid an argument such as, if there is no God, who created the universe? To grasp the axiom that existence exists means to grasp the fact that nature, i.e. the universe as a whole, cannot be created or annihilated, that it cannot come into or go out of existence, whether its basic constituent elements are atoms, or subatomic particles, or some yet undiscovered forms of energy. It is not ruled by a consciousness, or by will, or by chance, but by the law of identity. All the countless forms, motions, combinations, and dissolutions of elements within the universe, from a floating speck of dust to the formation of a galaxy to the emergence of life, are caused and determined by the identities of the elements involved. Nature is the metaphysically given, i.e. the nature of nature is outside the power of any volition. Man's volition is an attribute of his consciousness, of his rational faculty, and consists in the choice to perceive existence or to evade it. To perceive existence, to discover the characteristics or properties, the identities of the things that exist, means to discover and accept the metaphysically given. Only on the basis of this knowledge is man able to learn how the things given in nature can be rearranged to serve his needs, which is his method of survival. The power to rearrange the combinations of natural elements is the only creative power man possesses. It is an enormous and glorious power, and it is the only meaning of the concept creative. Creation does not, and metaphysically cannot, mean the power to bring something into existence out of nothing. Creation means the power to bring into existence an arrangement, or combination, or integration of natural elements that had not existed before. This is true of any human product, scientific or aesthetic. Man's imagination is nothing more than the ability to rearrange the things he has observed in reality. The best and the briefest identification of man's power in regard to nature is Francis Bacon's "Nature, to be commanded, must be obeyed." In this context, to be commanded means to be made to serve man's purposes. To be obeyed means that they cannot be served unless man discovers the properties of natural elements and uses them accordingly. For example, 200 years ago, men would have said that it is impossible to hear a human voice at a distance of 238,000 miles. It is as impossible today as it was then, but If we are able to hear an astronaut's voice coming from the moon, it is by means of the science of electronics, which discovered certain natural phenomena and enabled men to build the kind of equipment that picks up the vibrations of that voice, transmits them, and reproduces them on Earth. Without this knowledge and this equipment, centuries of wishing, praying, screaming, and foot stamping would not make a man's voice heard at the distance of 10 miles. Today, this is implicitly understood and, more or less, accepted in regard to the physical sciences, hence their progress. It is neither understood nor accepted, and is, in fact, vociferously denied, in regard to the humanities, the sciences dealing with man, hence their stagnant barbarism. Almost unanimously, man is regarded as an unnatural phenomenon, either as a supernatural entity, whose mystic, divine endowment, the mind, or soul, is above nature, or as a subnatural entity, whose mystic, demoniacal endowment, the mind, is an enemy of nature, ecology. The purpose of all such theories is to exempt man from the law of identity. But man exists, and his mind exists. Both are part of nature. Both possess a specific identity. The attribute of volition does not contradict the fact of identity, just as the existence of living organisms does not contradict the existence of inanimate matter. Living organisms possess the power of self-initiated motion, which inanimate matter does not possess. Man's consciousness possesses the power of self-initiated motion in the realm of cognition, thinking, which the consciousness of other living species do not possess. But just as animals are able to move only in accordance with the nature of their bodies, so man is able to initiate and direct his mental action only in accordance with the nature, the identity, of his consciousness. His volition is limited to his cognitive processes. He has power to identify and to conceive of rearranging the elements of reality, but not the power to alter them. He has the power to use his cognitive faculty as its nature requires, but not the power to alter it, nor to escape the consequences of its misuse. He has the power to suspend, evade, corrupt, or subvert his perception of reality, but not the power to escape the existential and psychological disasters that follow. The use or misuse of his cognitive faculty determines a man's choice of values, which determine his emotions and his character. It is in this sense that man is a being of self-made soul. Man's faculty of volition, as such, is not a contradiction of nature, but it opens the way for a host of contradictions. When and if men do not grasp the crucial difference between the metaphysically given and any object, institution, procedure, or rule of conduct made by man. It is the metaphysically given that must be accepted. It cannot be changed. It is the man-made that must never be accepted uncritically. It must be judged, then accepted or rejected, and changed when necessary. Man is not omniscient or infallible. He can make innocent errors through lack of knowledge, or he can lie, cheat, and fake. The man-made may be a product of genius, perceptiveness, ingenuity, or it may be a product of stupidity, deception, malice, evil. One man may be right and everyone else wrong, or vice versa, or any numerical division in between. Nature does not give man any automatic guarantee of the truth of his judgments, and this is a metaphysically given fact, which must be accepted. Who then is to judge? Each man, to the best of his ability and honesty. What is the standard of judgment? The metaphysically given. The metaphysically given cannot be true or false. It simply is. And man determines the truth or falsehood of his judgments by whether they correspond to or contradict the facts of reality. The metaphysically given cannot be right or wrong. It is the standard of right or wrong, by which a rational man judges his goals, his values, his choices. The metaphysically given is, was, will be, and had to be. Nothing made by man had to be. It was made by choice. To rebel against the metaphysically given is to engage in a futile attempt to negate existence. To accept the man-made as beyond challenge is to engage in a successful attempt to negate one's own consciousness. Serenity comes from the ability to say yes to existence. Courage comes from the ability to say no to the wrong choices made by others. Any natural phenomenon, i.e. any event which occurs without human participation, is the metaphysically given, and could not have occurred differently or failed to occur. A phenomenon involving human action is the man-made, and could have been different. For example, a flood occurring in an uninhabited land is the metaphysically given. A dam built to contain the flood water is the man-made. If the builders miscalculate and the dam breaks, the disaster is metaphysical in its origin, but intensified by man in its consequences. To correct the situation, men must obey nature by studying the causes and potentialities of the flood. Then command nature by building better flood controls. But to declare that all of man's efforts to improve the conditions of his existence are futile, to declare that nature is unknowable because we cannot prove that there will be a flood next year, even though there has been one every year in memory, to declare that human knowledge is an illusion because the original dam builders were certain that the dam would hold, but it did not, is to drive men back to the primordial confusion on the relationship of consciousness to existence, and thus to rob men of serenity and courage, as well as of many other things. Yet this is what modern philosophy has been declaring for 200 years or longer. Observe that the philosophical system based on the axiom of the primacy of existence, i.e., on recognizing the absolutism of reality, led to the recognition of man's identity and rights. But the philosophical systems based on the primacy of consciousness, i.e., on the seemingly megalomaniacal notion that nature is whatever man wants it to be, led to the view that man possesses no identity, that he is infinitely flexible, malleable, usable, and disposable. Ask yourself why. A major part of the philosopher's attack on man's mind is devoted to attempts to obliterate the difference between the metaphysically given and the man-made. The confusion on this issue started as an ancient error, to which even Aristotle contributed in some of his Platonist aspects. But today it is running deliberately and inexcusably wild. A typical package deal used by professors of philosophy runs as follows. To prove the assertion that there is no such thing as necessity in the universe, a professor declares that just as this country did not have to have 50 states, there could have been 48 or 52, so the solar system did not have to have 9 planets. There could have been 7 or 11. It is not sufficient, he declares, to prove that something is. One must also prove that it had to be. And since nothing had to be, nothing is certain, and anything goes. The technique of undercutting man's mind consists in palming off the man-made as if it were the metaphysically given, then ascribing to nature the concepts that refer only to man's lack of knowledge, such as chance or contingency, then reversing the two elements of the package deal. From the assertion, man is unpredictable, therefore nature is unpredictable, the argument goes, nature possesses volition, man does not. Nature is free, man is ruled by unknowable forces. Nature is not to be conquered, man is. Most people believe that an issue of this kind is empty academic talk of no practical significance to anyone, which blinds them to its consequences in their own lives. If one were to tell them that the package deal made of this issue is part of the nagging uncertainty, the quiet hopelessness, the gray despair of their daily inner state, they would deny it. They would not recognize it introspectively. But the inability to introspect is one of the consequences of this package deal. Most men have no knowledge of the nature or the functioning of a human consciousness, and, consequently, no knowledge of what is or is not possible to them. What one can or cannot demand of oneself and of others. What is or is not one's fault. On the implicit premise that consciousness has no identity, men alternate between the feeling that they possess some sort of omnipotent power over their consciousness and can abuse it with impunity. It doesn't matter, it's only in my mind. And the feeling that they have no choice, no control, that the content of consciousness is innately predetermined, that they are victims of the impenetrable mystery inside their own skulls, prisoners of an unknowable enemy, helpless automatons, driven by inexplicable emotions. I can't help it. That's the way I am. Men are crippled by the influence of this uncertainty. When such a man considers a goal or desire he wants to achieve, the first question in his mind is, can I do it? Not, what is required to do it? His question means, do I have the innate ability? For example, I want to be a composer more than anything else on earth, but I have no idea of how it's done. Do I have that mysterious gift which will do it for me somehow? He has never heard of a premise such as the primacy of consciousness. But that is the premise moving him as he embarks on a hopeless search through the dark labyrinth of his consciousness. Hopeless because without reference to existence, nothing can be learned about one's consciousness. If he does not give up his desire right then, he stumbles uncertainly to attempt to achieve it. Any small success augments his anxiety. He does not know what caused it, and whether he can repeat it. Any small failure is a crushing blow. He takes it as proof that he lacks the mystic endowment. When he makes a mistake, he does not ask himself, what do I need to learn? He asks, what's wrong with me? He waits for an automatic and omnipotent inspiration which never comes. He spends years on a cheerless struggle with his eyes focused inward on the growing, leering monster of self-doubt, while existence drifts by unseen on the periphery of his mental vision. Eventually, he gives up. Substitute for composer any other profession, goal, or desire. Be it a scientist, a businessman, a reporter, or a head waiter. To get rich, to find friends, to lose weight. And the pattern remains the same. Some of the pattern's victims are phonies, but not all. It is impossible to tell what amount of authentic intelligence, particularly in the arts, has been hampered, stunted, or crushed by the myth of innate endowment. Unable to determine what they can or cannot change, some men attempt to rewrite reality, i.e., to alter the nature of the metaphysically given. Some dream of a universe in which man experiences nothing but happiness, no pain, no frustration, no illness, and wonder why they lose the desire to improve their life on earth. Some feel that they would be brave, honest, ambitious in a world where everyone automatically shared these virtues, but not in the world as it is. Some dread the thought of eventual death and never undertake the task of living. Some grant omniscience to the passage of time and regard tradition as the equivalent of nature. If people have believed an idea for centuries, they feel it must be true. Some grant omnipotence and the status of the metaphysically given, not even to people's ideas, but to people's feelings. and pander to the irrationality of others, to their blind emotions, such as prejudices, superstitions, envy, regardless of the truth or falsehood of the issues involved, on the premise that it doesn't matter whether this is true if people feel that it's true. Some men switch to others, who were helpless in the matter, the blame for their own actions. Some men who were helpless in the matter accept the blame for the actions of others. Some feel guilty because they do not know what they have no way of knowing. Some feel guilty for not having known yesterday what they have learned today. Some feel guilty for not being able to convert the whole world to their own ideas effortlessly and overnight. The question of how to deal with nature is partially understood, at least by some people. But the question of how to deal with men and how to judge them is still in the state of a primeval jungle. It is man's faculty of volition that sets him apart, even in the eyes of those who deny the existence of that faculty, and makes men regard themselves and others as unintelligible, unknowable, exempt from the law of identity. But nothing is exempt from the law of identity. A man-made product did not have to exist, but once made, it does exist. A man's actions did not have to be performed, but once performed, they are facts of reality. The same is true of a man's character. He did not have to make the choices he made, but once he has formed his character, it is a fact, and it is his personal identity. Man's volition gives him great, but not unlimited, latitude to change his character. If he does, the change becomes a fact. Things of human origin, whether physical or psychological, may be designated as man-made facts, as distinguished from the metaphysically given facts. A skyscraper is a man-made fact. A mountain is a metaphysically given fact. One can alter a skyscraper or blow it up, just as one can alter or blow up a mountain. But so long as it exists, one cannot pretend that it is not there or that it is not what it is. The same principle applies to men's actions and characters. A man does not have to be a worthless scoundrel, but so long as he chooses to be, he is a worthless scoundrel and must be treated accordingly. To treat him otherwise is to contradict a fact. A man does not have to be a heroic achiever, but so long as he chooses to be, he is a heroic achiever and must be treated accordingly. To treat him otherwise is to contradict a fact. Men did not have to build a skyscraper, but once they did, it is worse than a contradiction to regard a skyscraper as a mountain, as a metaphysically given fact, which, on this view, just had to happen. The faculty of volition gives man a special status in two crucial respects. One, unlike the metaphysically given, man's products, whether material or intellectual, are not to be accepted uncritically. And two, by its metaphysically given nature, a man's volition is outside the power of other men. What the unalterable basic constituents are to nature, the attribute of a volitional consciousness is to the entity of man. Nothing can force a man to think. Others may offer him incentives or impediments, rewards or punishments. They may destroy his brain by drugs or by the blow of a club, but they cannot order his mind to function. This is in his exclusive sovereign power. Man is neither to be obeyed nor to be commanded. What has to be obeyed is man's metaphysically given nature, in the sense in which one obeys the nature of all existence. This means, in man's case, that one must recognize the fact that his mind is not to be commanded in any sense, including the sense applicable to the rest of nature. Natural objects can be reshaped to serve man's goals and are to be regarded as means to men's ends, but man himself cannot and is not. In regard to nature, to accept what I cannot change means to accept the metaphysically given. To change what I can means to strive to rearrange the given by acquiring knowledge, as science and technology, e.g. medicine, are doing. To know the difference means to know that one cannot rebel against nature, and, when no action is possible, one must accept nature serenely. In regard to man, to accept does not mean to agree, and to change does not mean to force. What one must accept is the fact that the minds of other men are not in one's power, as one's own mind is not in theirs. One must accept their right to make their own choices, and one must agree or disagree, accept or reject, join or oppose them, as one's mind dictates. The only means of changing men is the same as the means of changing nature: knowledge, which, in regard to men, is to be used as a process of persuasion, when and if their minds are active. When they are not, one must leave them to the consequences of their own errors. To know the difference means that one must never accept man-made evils. There are no others. In silent resignation, one must never submit to them voluntarily. And even if one is imprisoned in some ghastly dictatorship's jail, where no action is possible, serenity comes from the knowledge that one does not accept it. To deal with men by force is as impractical as to deal with nature by persuasion, which is the policy of savages who rule men by force and plead with nature by prayers, incantations, and bribes, sacrifices. It does not work, and has not worked in any human society in history. Yet this is the policy to which modern philosophers are urging mankind to revert, as they have reverted to the notion of the primacy of consciousness. They urge a passive, mystic, ecological submission to nature, and the rule of brute force for men. The philosophers' denial of the law of identity permits them to evade man's identity and the requirements of his survival. It permits them to evade the fact that man cannot survive for long in a state of nature, that reason is his tool of survival, that he survives by means of man-made products, and that the source of man-made products is man's intelligence. Intelligence is the ability to grasp the facts of reality and to deal with them long range, i.e., conceptually. On the axiom of the primacy of existence, intelligence is man's most precious attribute, but it has no place in a society ruled by the primacy of consciousness. It is such a society's deadliest enemy. Today, intelligence is neither recognized nor rewarded, but is being systematically extinguished by a growing flood of brazenly flaunted irrationality. As just one example of the extent to which today's culture is dominated by the primacy of consciousness, observe the following. In politics, people hold a ruthless, absolutist, either-or attitude toward elections. They expect a man either to win or not, and are concerned only with the winner, ignoring the loser altogether, even though, in some cases, the loser was right. While in economics, in the realm of production, they evade the absolutism of reality, of the fact that man either produces or not, and destroy the winners in favor of the losers. To them, man's decisions are an absolute. Reality's demands are not. The climax of that trend, the ultimate cashing in on the package deal of the metaphysical and the man-made, is the egalitarian movement and its philosophical manifesto, John Rawls' A Theory of Justice. This obscenely evil theory proposes to subordinate man's nature and mind to the desires, including envy, not merely of the lowest human specimens, but of the lowest non-existence, to the emotions these would have felt before they were born, and requires that men make lifelong choices on the premise that they are all equally devoid of brains. The fact that a brain cannot project an alteration of its own nature and power, that a genius cannot project himself into the state of a moron, and vice versa, that the needs and desires of a genius and a moron are not identical, that a genius reduced to the existential level of a moron would perish in unspeakable agony, and a moron raised to the existential level of a genius would paint graffiti on the sides of a computer, then die of starvation. All this does not enter the skulls of men who have dispensed with the law of identity, and therefore with reality, who demand equal results, regardless of unequal causes, and who propose to alter metaphysical facts by the power of whims and guns. This is being preached, touted, and demanded today. There can be no intellectual or moral neutrality on such an issue. The moral cowards who try to evade it by pleading ignorance, confusion, or helplessness, who keep silent and avoid the battle, yet feel a growing sense of guilty terror over the question of what they can or cannot change, are paving the way for the egalitarians' atrocities, and will end up like the derelicts whom Alcoholics Anonymous is struggling to help. The least that any decent man can do today is to fight that book's doctrine, to fight it intransigently on moral grounds. A proposal to annihilate intelligence by slow torture cannot be treated as a difference of civilized opinion. If any man feels that the world is too complex and its evils too big to cope with, let him remember that it is too big to drown in a glass of whiskey.
And that was Chapter 3 of Ayn Rand's book, Philosophy, Who Needs It? Back in a minute. Thank you. So now from Stuart-Varney from Varney and Company.
Much indeed. We'll see you again later. Coming up, listen to how Vice President Kamala Harris characterizes the Republican Party. Roll tape.
These extremists have a plan to take their agenda national. But I have news for them. We're not having that.
Extremists? We're going to talk a lot about that just a little later in the show.
So what's fascinating, this is the mistake that the Republicans make all the time. They assume that the Democrats are talking about them, right? He says, if you listen carefully, he says, listen to Kamala Harris, who is trying to make the Republicans talking about the Republican Party. So then she comes out and says, these extremists have an agenda, blah, 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 right? But she doesn't say these Republican extremists, or she doesn't say the Republican Party is extremist. No. She just says these extremists and we're not having anything to do with it. And then he comes back and reinforces the idea that she's talking about Republicans. What he should have done is say, she's talking about extremists. Who would that be? Who could she be talking about? She's not talking about me. She's not talking about anybody I know. So who could she be talking about? That's what Mr. Varney should have said. Back in a minute. Thank you. So with the Durham report, this matter now with Russian collusion, the Russian collusion hoax is now closed. So President Trump would be well advised to close the book on this. This would be an excellent opportunity for the president to say, this is now done. This is over. And then go on to thank the people that have been his supporters throughout it all over the past 4 years. Number one on that list, and he should list them individually, each individual that backed him 100% from the beginning. And the number one individual that he should be thanking is Sean Hannity. I have my issues with Sean Hannity, but his loyalty to Donald Trump cannot be questioned. He backed Donald Trump from the very beginning. More importantly, perhaps, and perhaps more realistically, Sean Hannity backed the truth. And as he has said many times, the truth will out. And it did. So, but still, Donald Trump should have a press conference or rally in which he thanks each of the individuals that stood by him during these 4 years, and name them, Diamond and Silk and Sean Hannity, etc. Name those people, and let's get some finality here. Let's go ahead and close this chapter and move on, because the left would love nothing better than to have Donald Trump and his followers go on and on and on about this. So, and then the rest of the country would probably, a lot of the Democrats would like that as well. So let's close the book on it. We need it also, us, the Trump supporters, the conservatives, we need to close the book on this psychologically. It's been a long 4 years. It's been a tough situation psychologically for all of us. Let's close the book on it and move on. Back in a minute. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. So I'm reminding you that the left has no authority, no power, and they can't win.